My wife thought she was careful, but her forgotten fitness tracker recorded every single heart rate spike during her secret meetings with my boss in our family minivan. When I discovered the truth, I had the perfect plan for revenge. Watch until the end. Subscribe to our channel and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. The fitness tracker changed everything. I remember staring at the heart rate graph on my phone screen, watching the peaks and valleys tell a story I never wanted to hear. A story of betrayal, of moments stolen from our marriage, of passion that wasn't meant for me. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Daniel Cooper. I'm 34 years old, have been married to Rebecca for 8 years, and we have 2 beautiful children, Emma, 6, and Noah, 4. I work as a senior account manager at Meridian Marketing, a mid-sized agency in Chicago. My boss, Richard Montgomery, is the type of guy who commands attention when he walks into a room. Tall, fit, always dressed immaculately in tailored suits, with a confident smile that clients seem unable to resist. He's 42, divorced, and the kind of successful that makes other men simultaneously respect and resent him. Rebecca and I met in college. She was studying psychology while I was in business administration. We fell in love quickly, built a life together, bought a house in the suburbs, and settled into what I thought was domestic bliss. She put her career on hold when Emma was born, though she recently started working part-time at a local boutique to get out of the house, as she put it. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but I thought we were happy. Sure, the passion had dimmed somewhat over the years, replaced by the comfortable familiarity that comes with building a life together. But I loved her. I still do, even after everything. The first sign something was wrong appeared about 6 months ago. Rebecca suddenly became interested in her appearance in a way she hadn't been since before the kids. New clothes, a different hairstyle, more time at the gym. At first I was pleased. I thought maybe she was doing it for herself or even for me. I complimented her, encouraged her. God, I was so blind. Then came the changes in her schedule. The boutique where she worked started having inventory nights that kept her late. She joined a book club that met every other Thursday. She volunteered for school events that somehow always ran longer than expected. Looking back, the signs were all there, but I trusted her completely. That was my first mistake. The fitness tracker was actually my gift to her for our anniversary last year. A Fitbit Sense with all the bells and whistles. Heart rate monitoring, sleep tracking, GPS, the works. Rebecca had mentioned wanting to track her workouts more accurately, and I thought it would be the perfect gift. Little did I know it would eventually reveal the truth about her betrayal. Rebecca was always forgetting to charge it or leaving it places. One evening, about 2 months ago, I was cleaning out our minivan after a family trip to the lake. Under the passenger seat, I found her Fitbit. The battery was dead, so I took it inside to charge it for her. The next morning, I plugged it into my laptop to sync it before returning it to her. That's when I noticed something odd in the data. There were several heart rate spikes during times when Rebecca should have been at work or running errands. Curious, I dug deeper. The heart rate data showed a pattern. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, between 2:30 p.m. and 4:00 p.m., her heart rate would spike dramatically, reaching levels usually associated with intense exercise or other activities. But Rebecca had told me she worked at the boutique during those hours. I told myself there must be a logical explanation. Maybe she was taking a fitness class she hadn't mentioned. Maybe the data was glitchy. Maybe I was overthinking things. But something didn't feel right, so I started paying more attention. I noticed Rebecca was particularly attentive to her appearance on Tuesdays and Thursdays. New lingerie appeared in her drawer. She was constantly checking her phone, smiling at messages I couldn't see. And our minivan, which I rarely drove, always seemed to have less gas than it should on those days. Still, I needed proof before confronting her, so I did something I never thought I'd do in my marriage. I installed a small, discreet camera in our minivan, hidden in the rearview mirror ornament. I felt sick doing it, but I needed to know the truth. For a week, nothing happened. The camera captured Rebecca driving to work, to the grocery store to pick up the kids from school, normal, everyday activities. I started to feel guilty for suspecting her. Then came that Tuesday. I was at work in a meeting with clients when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the camera. I excused myself and went to the bathroom to check it. What I saw shattered my world. Rebecca pulled into the parking lot of the Lakeside Motel, a place about 20 minutes from our home. She checked her makeup in the rearview mirror, applied fresh lipstick, and waited. A few minutes later, another car pulled up next to ours. The driver's door opened and out stepped Richard Montgomery, my boss. I watched, unable to look away as he leaned into our minivan and kissed my wife. Not a friendly peck, but a passionate kiss that made it clear this wasn't their first meeting. They spoke briefly, then Rebecca moved to the back of the minivan where we usually had the kids' seats, though they had been removed. Richard joined her and they closed the door. The camera didn't capture what happened next, but the motion alerts kept coming for the next hour. I didn't need to see it to know what was happening. They were having sex in our family minivan, the same vehicle where we took our children to school, to soccer practice, to family vacations. I sat in that bathroom stall for what felt like hours, my world collapsing around me. My wife was cheating on me with my boss. The two people I saw almost every day who I trusted were betraying me in the most intimate way possible. When I finally composed myself enough to return to the meeting, Richard was already there, looking completely normal, as if he hadn't just been with my wife. He smiled at me, asked if everything was okay. I somehow managed to nod and sit through the rest of the meeting, my mind replaying what I had seen over and over again. That night, Rebecca came home, kissed me and the kids, and acted like nothing had happened. She made dinner, helped Emma with her homework, gave Noah his bath. All while I sat there, watching her, wondering how long this had been going on, how many times they had been together, how she could look me in the eye and act like she hadn't betrayed everything we had built together. I didn't confront her that night. I needed time to think, to plan my next move. I spent the next few days gathering more evidence. I checked our phone records and found numerous calls and texts between Rebecca and Richard, always during those suspicious afternoon hours. I looked at our credit card statements and found charges at restaurants and stores on days when Rebecca said she was working late. And I continued to monitor the camera in the minivan. They met again that Thursday and the following Tuesday and Thursday after that, always at the same motel, always during the same hours. Sometimes they would go inside a room, other times they would stay in the minivan, but the pattern was clear. After 2 weeks of gathering evidence, I had enough. I decided to confront them both, but not separately. No, I wanted them to face me together, to see the pain they had caused me. I chose a Tuesday for my confrontation, knowing they would be meeting at the motel. I told my office I had a family emergency and left early. I drove to the lakeside motel and parked where I could see our minivan but wouldn't be immediately visible. Right on schedule, Rebecca arrived first. She parked in their usual spot and waited. Richard arrived 10 minutes later. They kissed, then moved to the back of the minivan. That's when I made my move. I walked calmly to the minivan and knocked on the window. I will never forget the look of shock and horror on their faces when they saw me standing there. Rebecca scrambled to cover herself with a blanket while Richard frantically tried to pull his pants up. "Daniel," Rebecca gasped, "what are you doing here?" "I think that's my question," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the rage and pain boiling inside me. "What are you two doing in our family minivan?" Richard, ever the smooth talker, tried to take control of the situation. "Daniel, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" I replied. "Because it looks like you're fucking my wife in the back of our minivan, the same minivan where our children sit, the same minivan I bought to take our family on vacations." Rebecca started crying. "Daniel, please, I can explain." "Explain what?" I asked. "Explain how long you've been cheating on me. Explain how you could betray our marriage, our family. Explain how you could sleep with my boss of all people." I turned to Richard. "And you, I trusted you, I respected you, I worked my ass off for you, and this is how you repay me, by sleeping with my wife." Richard had the decency to look ashamed. "Daniel, I'm sorry. It just happened." "Things like this don't just happen," I said. "You made choices, both of you, choices that destroyed our family." I pulled out my phone and showed them the heart rate data from the Fitbit. "You forgot your fitness tracker in the minivan," I told Rebecca. "It recorded everything, every meeting, every encounter. Your heart rate doesn't lie, even if you do." Rebecca's face crumpled. "How long have you known?" "Long enough," I replied. "Long enough to see that neither of you cared about how this would affect me or our children. Long enough to realize that our marriage meant nothing to you." I turned to leave, but Richard called out, "Wait, what are you going to do?" I looked back at them, these two people who had betrayed me so completely. "I'm going to do what I should have done the moment I found out. I'm going to protect myself and my children." I walked back to my car, leaving them half-dressed and panic-stricken in the minivan. As I drove away, my phone started ringing. Rebecca, then Richard, then Rebecca again. I ignored them all. When I got home, I packed a bag for myself and the kids. I called my sister, explained the situation, and asked if we could stay with her for a few days. She agreed immediately. Then I called the kids' school and arranged to pick them up early. By the time Rebecca came home, we were gone. I left a note on the kitchen counter. "Rebecca, I know about you and Richard. I have proof. I've taken the kids to stay with Amy for a while. Don't try to contact me. I'll be in touch through my lawyer. Daniel, over the next few days, my phone exploded with calls and messages from Rebecca, begging, pleading, apologizing. I ignored them all. Richard also tried to contact me, saying we needed to talk, that he could explain. I blocked his number. Instead, I focused on my children, on creating a sense of normalcy for them despite the chaos our lives had become. I consulted with a divorce attorney who advised me on my options. I gathered all the evidence I had collected and began the process of filing for divorce. A week after the confrontation, I received an email from Human Resources at Meridian Marketing. Richard had disclosed his relationship with Rebecca to them, presumably to get ahead of any complaint I might file. They wanted to meet with me to discuss the situation. I met with the HR director and the company's legal counsel the next day. I brought all my evidence, including the footage from the Minivan camera and the Fitbit data. I explained how Richard had abused his position as my boss to pursue a relationship with my wife, how he had betrayed not just me personally, but also his professional responsibilities. They listened attentively, asked questions, and took notes. At the end of the meeting, they assured me they would investigate thoroughly and take appropriate action. 3 days later, Richard was fired for violation of the company's ethics policy. His behavior was deemed unbecoming of a company leader and a breach of trust with subordinates. I was offered a transfer to another department with a slight promotion as compensation for the emotional distress I had experienced. As for Rebecca, she continued to try to contact me. Calls, texts, emails, even showing up at Amy's house. I refused to see her or speak to her directly, communicating only through my lawyer about matters concerning the children. Eventually, she sent me a long email explaining how the affair had started. She claimed she had felt neglected, that I was always working, always focused on my career. She said Richard had been attentive, had made her feel desired and appreciated in ways I apparently hadn't. She swore it had meant nothing, that she had made a terrible mistake, that she still loved me and wanted to save our marriage. I read her email several times, trying to see if there was any truth to her claims. Had I neglected her? Had I been so focused on providing for our family that I had forgotten to show her how much I loved her? Perhaps there was some truth to that, but it didn't excuse what she had done, the choices she had made. I replied with a single sentence: "If you truly loved me, you wouldn't have betrayed me with my boss in our family minivan." The divorce proceedings moved forward. I asked for primary custody of the children, citing Rebecca's affair and questionable judgment. She contested it, claiming she had made a mistake but was still a good mother. The court ordered a custody evaluation. During this time, I learned more about the affair from colleagues who had suspected something was going on. Apparently, Richard and Rebecca had been seeing each other for almost a year, not just the few months I had evidence of. They had been careless, meeting for lunch, exchanging glances at company events. Everyone seemed to know except me. The betrayal cut deeper with each new revelation. Not just the affair itself, but the public humiliation of being the last to know, of having colleagues whisper behind my back, of wondering who else had known and said nothing. 3 months after the confrontation at the motel, we had our day in court. The judge reviewed all the evidence, including the custody evaluation, which found both Rebecca and me to be loving, capable parents despite the circumstances. In the end, we were granted joint custody, with the children living primarily with me and spending weekends and some weekdays with Rebecca. As for the divorce settlement, Rebecca didn't contest it. She agreed to my terms, including my keeping the house with me buying out her share, a fair division of our assets, and a reasonable child support arrangement. Perhaps she felt guilty, or perhaps she just wanted it to be over. The day our divorce was finalized, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that the legal battle was over, that I could begin to rebuild my life. Sadness for what had been lost, for the family that had been broken, for the trust that had been shattered. Rebecca called me that evening after the children were asleep. For the first time since the confrontation, I answered. "It's done," she said, her voice small and tired. "Yes," I replied, "it's done." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry, Daniel, I know you don't believe me, but I am truly sorry for what I did to you, to us, to our family." I didn't respond immediately. What could I say? That I forgave her? I didn't, that I understood. I didn't, that it was okay. It wasn't. "I know," I finally said, "but sorry doesn't change what happened." "No," she agreed, "it doesn't, but I hope someday you can forgive me, if not for my sake, then for Emma and Noah's." I thought about our children, about the impact this would have on them as they grew up. about the importance of them seeing their parents at least be civil to each other, if not friends. I'm not there yet, I admitted, but for the kids' sake, I'll try. We spoke for a few more minutes, mostly about practical matters concerning the children. Before we hung up, she asked, "Are you happy, Daniel, in your new life?" I considered the question. Was I happy? No, not yet, but I was healing. I was focusing on my children, on my new position at work, on rebuilding my sense of self after the betrayal. I'm getting there, I told her, one day at a time. After we hung up, I sat on my porch, looking at the stars. The same stars Rebecca and I had gazed at on our first date, on our wedding night, on countless evenings in our life together. The same stars that had witnessed our love grow, our family expand, and ultimately our marriage crumble. I thought about the fitness tracker, about how something so small had revealed something so devastating, about how technology designed to monitor heart health had exposed the unhealthy state of my marriage. There was a certain irony in that. As for Richard, I heard he had moved to another city, taking a position at a smaller agency with a significant pay cut. Some of my former colleagues said he had tried to blame me for his downfall, claiming I had set him up out of jealousy over his success. Others said he had admitted his mistake and was trying to rebuild his career and reputation. I didn't care either way. He was no longer a part of my life. 6 months after the divorce, I was having dinner with Emma and Noah when Emma asked a question that caught me off guard. "Daddy, why doesn't Mommy live with us anymore?" I had been expecting this question, but was still unprepared for the innocent curiosity in her eyes. Noah looked up from his spaghetti, equally interested in my answer. "Well," I began carefully, "sometimes grown-ups have problems they cannot fix, and it becomes better for everyone if they live in different houses. But both Mommy and I love you very much, and that will never change." Emma considered this for a moment. "Like when me and Noah fight over toys and have to play in different rooms?" I smiled at her simple but accurate comparison. "Something like that, yes. But we always make up after," Noah pointed out. "Will you and Mommy make up too?" The question pierced my heart. "It's a different kind of problem, buddy. But Mommy and I are working on being friends again, for you too." That night, after putting the kids to bed, I found myself looking at old family photos on my phone. Pictures of happier times, of vacations and birthdays and ordinary days made special by being together. I came across a photo of Rebecca and me standing in front of our minivan the day we bought it. We were smiling, excited about the family adventures we would have in it. I had sold the minivan shortly after the divorce was finalized. I couldn't bear to look at it, much less drive it, knowing what had happened in it. It was too powerful a reminder of the betrayal. I had used the money to buy a sensible SUV that had no history, no memories attached to it. The next day was Saturday, which meant the kids would be going to Rebecca's apartment for the weekend. As usual, she came to pick them up, and as usual, we exchanged minimal pleasantries for the sake of the children. But this time, as she was leaving with Emma and Noah, she paused and turned back to me. "Daniel, I know I have no right to ask this, but would you consider having coffee with me sometime next week? There are some things I'd like to talk about regarding the kids' schedule this summer." I hesitated. We usually discussed such matters via email or through our court-appointed mediator. Face-to-face meetings were rare and generally uncomfortable. "I suppose we could do that," I finally said. "Tuesday at 10 at the coffee shop near your work," she nodded, looking relieved. "Thank you, I'll see you then." Tuesday came and I found myself feeling strangely nervous as I entered the coffee shop. Rebecca was already there, sitting at a table near the back. She looked different somehow, thinner, paler, with dark circles under her eyes that her makeup couldn't quite conceal. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down across from her. "You mentioned the summer schedule," I prompted, not wanting to engage in small talk. She nodded and pulled out a calendar. "Yes, I was hoping we could talk about adjusting the visitation schedule during the summer months. With the kids out of school, I thought maybe we could be more flexible." We spent the next 20 minutes discussing arrangements, compromising on dates for family events and vacations. It was civil, almost cordial. As we were wrapping up, Rebecca suddenly said, "I stopped seeing the therapist." I looked at her, surprised by the non sequitur. "Okay." "She was helping me understand why I did what I did," Rebecca continued. "The affair with Richard. She helped me see the patterns in my behavior, the insecurities and fears that led me to make such destructive choices." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me was curious about her insights, about understanding the why behind the betrayal. Another part of me didn't want to hear her justifications or excuses. "The thing is," she went on when I didn't speak. I stopped going because I realized something important. It doesn't matter why I did it. Understanding the psychology behind my actions doesn't change what I did or the pain I caused. All that matters is that I take responsibility for my choices and their consequences. I studied her face, trying to gauge her sincerity. That's insightful, she gave a sad smile. Too little, too late, I know, but I wanted you to know that I don't blame you for any of it, not anymore. It was all me, my weakness, my selfishness, and I am truly sorry, Daniel. For the first time since discovering the affair, I felt a small crack in the wall of anger and resentment I had built around my heart. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of acceptance. Thank you for saying that, I said quietly. It helps a little. We left the coffee shop together and stood somewhat awkwardly on the sidewalk, unsure how to end this unexpectedly meaningful interaction. The kids told me you got a new car, Rebecca said finally. I nodded. Yes, an SUV. More practical for just the three of us. And you sold the minivan? Yes. I didn't elaborate on the reasons, but I could see in her eyes that she understood. Well, I should get back to work, she said. Thank you again for meeting me. You're welcome. I'll see you Friday when I drop off the kids. As I watched her walk away, I realized something had shifted between us. The raw pain had dulled somewhat, replaced by a melancholy acceptance of our new reality. We would never again be what we once were to each other, but perhaps we could find a way to coexist peacefully for the sake of our children. That evening, as I was making dinner for myself, the kids were at a playdate. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a woman named Melissa, introducing herself as Richard's ex-wife. She had heard about what happened from a mutual friend and wanted to meet with me. Curious and somewhat apprehensive, I agreed to meet her the following day at a restaurant near my office. Melissa turned out to be an elegant woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and a direct manner of speaking. Thank you for meeting me, she said after we had ordered. I know this must seem strange. A bit, I admitted. How can I help you? She took a deep breath. I wanted to tell you that I understand what you've been through because Richard did the same thing to me. He had an affair with my best friend while we were married. That's why we divorced 3 years ago. I stared at her, processing this information. I'm sorry that happened to you, but why are you telling me this now? Because when it happened to me, I felt so alone. Like I was the only person in the world who had experienced such a betrayal. It nearly destroyed me. Then I found a support group for people who had been cheated on, and it helped me heal. I thought maybe knowing you're not alone might help you too. I was touched by her concern, though still somewhat puzzled by her reaching out to a complete stranger. Thank you, that's kind of you. There's something else, she continued. After our divorce, I learned that Richard had cheated on me multiple times throughout our marriage, not just with my friend. It was a pattern for him, pursuing women who were married or in relationships. There was something about the challenge, the forbidden nature of it, that appealed to him. This new information shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. So Rebecca wasn't special to him. She was just another conquest. Melissa nodded sadly. I'm afraid so, and I thought she should know that too, but I didn't have her contact information and I wasn't sure if telling her would cause more harm than good, so I thought I'd talk to you first. I considered her words. Would it help Rebecca to know she had been just one in a long line of affairs, or would it only add to her humiliation and pain? Despite everything, I found I didn't want to cause Rebecca more suffering. I appreciate you sharing this with me, I told Melissa. But I think Rebecca has been through enough. Learning this would only hurt her more, and there's been enough hurt already. Melissa seemed to respect my decision. I understand. I just thought you both deserved to know the truth about the man who caused so much damage to your lives. We finished our meal talking about more pleasant topics, discovering we had several interests in common. By the end of lunch, I had gained not just insights into Richard's character but also a potential new friend. Over the next few months, life settled into a new normal. I focused on my job and my children, finding joy in small moments and everyday victories. Rebecca and I established a relatively amicable co-parenting relationship, communicating primarily about the children, but occasionally sharing brief, civil conversations about other matters. I also began seeing Melissa more frequently, first for coffee or lunch, then for dinner and movies. We bonded over our shared experience of betrayal, but our relationship quickly grew beyond that common pain point. She was intelligent, funny, kind, and understanding in ways that surprised and delighted me. Most importantly, she was patient, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. 1 year after my divorce was finalized, I found myself sitting on my porch once again, looking at the stars. But this time I wasn't alone. Melissa sat beside me, her hand in mine. "Penny for your thoughts," she said softly. I smiled. "I was just thinking about how much has changed in a year, how much I've changed. For the better, I hope." "Definitely for the better. A year ago, I couldn't imagine ever trusting anyone again. I couldn't see past the pain and betrayal." She squeezed my hand. "And now," I turned to look at her, this woman who had unexpectedly become such an important part of my life. "Now I know that what happened with Rebecca and Richard doesn't define me. It was something that happened to me, not because of me, and it doesn't determine my future or my capacity for happiness." Melissa leaned her head against my shoulder. "I'm glad you can see that now." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the cool evening breeze and the distant sounds of the neighborhood settling down for the night. "You know what else I've realized?" I said finally. "What's that?" "That sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead us to the best places. If Rebecca hadn't cheated, if I hadn't discovered the affair through that forgotten fitness tracker, I would never have met you." She lifted her head to look at me. "Are you saying you're glad it happened?" I considered the question carefully. "No, I wouldn't go that far. The pain was real, and the damage to my family, especially to my children, is something I would have spared them if I could. But I am grateful for where I've ended up, for the strength I've found, and for the people who have come into my life because of it." Melissa smiled, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "Like the Japanese art of kintsugi, where they repair broken pottery with gold. The breaks become part of the object's history, making it more beautiful, not less." I like that image, the idea that the broken places in my life could be filled with something precious, something that highlighted rather than hid the damage. That my story wasn't just one of betrayal and loss, but also of healing and growth. The fitness tracker that had revealed Rebecca's betrayal had been both the weapon that destroyed my old life and the tool that helped me build a new one. It had shown me a painful truth, but in doing so, it had set me free from a lie. As Melissa and I sat together under the stars, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Hope for the future, for new beginnings, for love that was honest and true. Hope that the broken pieces of my life could indeed be mended with gold, creating something stronger and more beautiful than before. And for the first time since finding that forgotten fitness tracker in our family minivan, I was genuinely grateful for the truth it had revealed.